Chapter 1. The Invitation. The humid air of Freetown settled heavy on the guests, but inside the grand Miata Stone Hall, the expensive central cooling system struggled against the weight of anticipation. Jalom, the groom, looked regal in a cream and gold kaftan, his posture betraying a supreme, almost reckless confidence. His marriage to Kumba, the striking heiress, was the social event of the season. Jalot had executed the most scandalous move imaginable. He had personally ensured all three of his most volatile ex-girlfriends received coveted invitations. The moment they arrived, the collective gasp was audible over the Creole band's soft jazz. Fatmata, the first great love, was a vision of fury in a vibrant emerald lapa, her head tie perfectly symmetrical and menacing. Aminata, the fiancée he had jilted at the 11th hour, carried herself with intellectual disdain in sleek gray silk. Quiet Isha, the last and most mysterious of the trio, possessed an unnerving stillness, her fingers nervously drumming the clasp of a small traditional handbag. Jalot met their hostile gazes with a triumphant, predatory smirk, lifting his champagne glass in a silent toast of challenge. Kumba, oblivious and breathtaking in her beaded white gown, squeezed his hand affectionately. "It was so gracious of you to invite them, my love," she murmured. Jalot merely kissed her forehead. He knew better. He hadn't invited them to be gracious. He'd invited them to light the fuse. The priest began his sermon, but the only gospel anyone was listening for was chaos.
Chapter 2. The Glare. The ceremony was an agonizing tableau of strained smiles and silent venom. Jalot repeated his vows with theatrical sincerity, but his eyes kept flicking to the third row, where his past sat like a jury waiting to convict. Fatmata's glare was relentless, hot and accusatory, capable of melting the wax of the ornate candles adorning the altar. Aminata, seated beside her, occasionally exchanged cryptic looks with Isha, whose hands had stopped fidgeting and now lay motionless in her lap. It was during the exchange of rings that the first crack appeared in the facade. As Kumba extended her hand, the huge, imported diamond ring momentarily caught the light and reflected a sharp beam directly into Fatmata's face. Fatmata flinched, not from the light, but from a sudden, visceral anger, causing her to sharply inhale. The sound, a loud, ragged hiss of outrage, cut through the quiet reverence of the hall. The priest paused, clearing his throat awkwardly. Jalot subtly turned his head toward the X's, his smirk briefly returning, a silent message passing between them. "Are you ready?" Kumba, thankfully, had been distracted by the ring. Aminata leaned toward Fatmata, whispering a fierce warning in Themne, urging caution. But the disruption had been noted. A wave of nervous energy rippled through the guests. The three women held the entire hall hostage with their mere presence, and Jalot was the maestro, enjoying the rising panic.
Chapter 3. The Gift Table. The reception kicked off with an explosion of color, music, and the unmistakable deep aroma of rice and groundnut stew. The three X's gravitated to the farthest corner, which conveniently overlooked the extravagantly decorated gift table. This was their makeshift war room. "He's doing this on purpose," Fatmata hissed, nursing a glass of potent palm wine. "The way he looked at us during the vows, he's enjoying our pain." Aminata ran a perfectly manicured finger over a list of gifts, her eyes scanning for anomalies. "We stick to the plan, Fatmata. He wants a spectacle, we give him a disaster, but we make sure it serves our purpose." Isha remained silent, her attention caught by a single item on the table, a large antique chest carved from dark mahogany, delivered late that afternoon. It had a heavy brass lock and a small, official-looking tag tied to the handle, which seemed out of place among the kitchen appliances and envelopes of cash. "Look at this," Isha murmured, pointing.
The tag is marked "From the Freetown Registry Office, Sealed Documents." Aminata's composure instantly cracked. The registry? Why would anyone gift sealed official papers at a wedding? Fatmata's eyes widened with sudden, dangerous clarity. He's left a clue, a bomb. That chest holds his real secrets, the ones that connect all four of us. We need to open it now, before he starts his wicked speech. The clock was ticking, and the women understood that Jallo's confidence was their narrow window of opportunity.
Chapter 4. The Speech. The clinking of silverware quieted as Jallo rose to give the traditional groom's address. He tapped the microphone, drawing every eye in the hall. He looked like the picture of success, a man who had conquered the city and now its most prized daughter. Instead of a heartfelt declaration to Kumba, he launched into a strange, rambling retrospective of his life. He thanked his business partners, his family, and then, slowly, he turned his gaze directly toward the corner where his past sat huddled. "But I must give special thanks to the great teachers in my life," Jallo announced, his voice booming. "Fatmata, Aminata, Isha, ladies, you taught me that ambition has no limits, and that sometimes a lie is simply a necessary foundation for a beautiful truth." The music stopped dead. The atmosphere turned instantly toxic. Kumba looked confused, while her father, the merchant, scowled deeply. Jallo raised his glass high. "This wedding is the culmination of everything you three contributed. You gave me the necessary resources, the necessary distractions, and the necessary scandal to finally reach this day." He paused for dramatic effect, his smile cold. "Thank you for the first lesson in deception. Now watch me apply the last." The exes exchanged frantic glances. They realized the antique chest was not a clue for them to find, but a prop for him to use. Fatmata exploded to her feet, palm wine splashing onto the white tablecloth.
Chapter 5. The Confrontation. Fatmata didn't wait for permission. She strode toward the stage, her high heels echoing across the polished floor. "A beautiful truth built on a necessary lie, Jallo?" she challenged, grabbing the microphone from his stunned hand. "You think you're smart? You invited us here because you want us to be witnesses, not guests. Witnesses to the final act of a fraud you started years ago." Before Jallo could react, Fatmata turned to Kumba. "Ask him about the land deal in Lumley Beach, the one he told me was my collateral, but he sold to Aminata before he even met you." The mention of the land deal sparked immediate panic. Aminata, realizing Fatmata was going off script and exposing their own complicity, lunged forward. "Fatmata, stop! You're ruining everything!" The two women wrestled briefly for the microphone, pulling the stand down with a deafening crash. In the ensuing chaos, the screams of the guests, the panicked waiters, Isha, the silent strategist, moved like a phantom. She ignored the fight and darted straight to the gift table. She knew the secret wasn't the land, it was the chest. Grabbing a heavy, ornate fork, she smashed the lock on the mahogany box. Inside, there was no treasure, only a stack of official papers tied with a faded red ribbon, dated 3 years prior, and a framed photograph.
Chapter 6. The Revelation. Aisha ripped the ribbon and fanned the documents out. As Fatmata and Aminata were being pulled apart by the ushers, Aisha climbed onto the toppled speaker box, clutching the framed photograph and the paperwork. She held up the image, a picture of Jallo from 3 years ago, standing next to a smiling woman none of the exes had ever seen, in what clearly looked like a courthouse. "Jallo is still married!" Aisha screamed, her voice cracking but cutting through the noise. "This is not a wedding, Kumba. These are papers from the registry office confirming his legal union with a woman named Bintu Kamara, dated before he even met any of us." The hall went into a horrified silence, save for Kumba's father, who roared incoherently about betrayal and legal action. The guests were shell-shocked. Bigamy in Sierra Leone was a scandal of the highest order. Fatmata and Aminata stared, stunned. They had plotted for chaos, but this, a legitimate, verifiable crime, was beyond their revenge fantasy. They were collateral damage in a far greater deception. Jallo simply stood on the stage, watching the scene unfold with an expression of serene satisfaction. The wedding was ruined. His reputation was in tatters. Yet, a look of profound, calculated success washed over his face, as if this was the precise, catastrophic outcome he had been hoping for all along. Chapter 7. The True Bride. The shock in the room was so thick you could cut it with a machete. Kumba, the supposed bride, slowly lowered her head, her magnificent veil obscuring her expression. Her father was now being physically restrained by 2 bodyguards. "Bintu Kamara," Jalal repeated, taking the microphone back and speaking into the shattered silence. "Yes, my wife. She sends her regards." He then smiled, a wide, breathtakingly triumphant smile, and gave a sharp, almost imperceptible nod toward the massive, arched mahogany doors at the rear of the hall. The doors swung inward, and a 4th woman entered. She wasn't Bintu Kamara. She was Kumba's older sister, Sona. Sona walked slowly down the aisle, her movements deliberate, holding up a phone with a live video call running. On the screen was Bintu Kamara, who cheerfully waved. "Congratulations, everyone! It was a great show," Bintu said over the speaker. The true, bewildering plot twist had unfolded. Kumba lifted her veil. She wasn't weeping, she was grinning, a shared look of wicked amusement passing between her and Jalal. The 3 X's looked from Kumba to Jalal, their faces reflecting total bewilderment. Jalal stepped toward Kumba and took her hand. "Ladies," he announced, gesturing to Fatmata, Aminata, and Isha, "meet my very willing co-conspirator."
Chapter 8. Jallo's Goal Achieved. Jallo clapped once, and a crew of event staff immediately began dismantling the elaborate floral arrangements. "Thank you all for attending the most expensive, most dramatic performance of the year," he announced. "My goal was simple: public, undeniable, and scandalous failure." He explained that Kumba's prenuptial agreement with her actual fiancé, a foreign businessman obsessed with appearances, contained an ironclad clause. If Kumba publicly married anyone other than him, she would forfeit her entire inheritance. However, if she was the victim of a scandalous, legally invalid wedding, the clause would be voided, proving her incapacity to choose a partner and thus protecting her fortune. "Kumba and I married 3 days ago in a private ceremony," Jallo confessed, holding up the real marriage license. "But to break her prior agreement, we needed a catastrophe. We needed documented, irrefutable shock that her father's lawyers could use to claim force and fraud." He turned to the X's. "Fatmata, Aminata, Isha, you gave us the spectacle, the proof of my deceit, and the necessary shock by confirming the bigamy lie. Your reward, the full restitution I owe each of you from my old business dealings, is being wired now." He had used their justifiable rage to achieve his own greater shared goal with Kumba. Kumba stepped forward, blowing a kiss to her shocked father. "The game is over, Papa," she said. Jallo smiled. The wedding was ruined, his goal achieved, and his exes were now paid accomplices.